So what do you think makes building surveying as a profession a fascination for people like you and me?
For me, when I left school, I found that I wanted to be in something that didn't involve sitting in an office all day long. I wanted to be out and about, and I love buildings. And my grandfather once said to me that I ought to get into something that involved buildings, because people always need buildings to live in, work in, play in, etc., which is true. He said, you'll always need a surveyor or an architect or something like that. So I decided to go into surveying. So that got me into surveying, but I've always had an interest in history. I remember as a kid running around castles pretending to be a knight fighting around the parapets. And I've always loved historic buildings. And so over the years, I found myself getting involved. In fact, I distinctly remember one day being sent out to do a survey, and all I had was an address, and I turned up and it was this timber frame thatched building, and I looked at it and I thought, I've not been trained for this, but I was told to get on with it anyway. Unfortunately, I've not been sued for it to this day, so I must have got it right, but I realised very quickly that there was a lot more to buildings than just the modern buildings I was used to looking at, and that's what got me interested in looking at thatched buildings and then timber frame buildings and into historic buildings. So that's how I got into it. But it is the fascination of, I suppose really, I'm very nosy and questioning. And I love investigating things. I love, trying to find out about things. So the actual process of working out how this building's evolved and then what's gone wrong with it, or how it's working, etc. I just love that. I've got an inquisitive mind, I suppose. What about yourself?
Oh, well, I trained as a planner. And when I finished my training as a planner, I looked at the planning profession and realised that nobody liked town planners. And my tutor took me out on a building survey one day as part of my university training, and I just fell in love with the idea that you could interrogate a structure and learn a lot more about it by looking at it and by then analysing it from a different perspective on a desk. And like you, I hated the idea of being put in a desk all day long. And so I just grew into surveying, and I've always worked in architects' practices and realised that there's a difference between architects and surveyors, and we have a certain synergy that we can offer each other in the way in which we understand buildings and building pathology. And I think it's the building pathology which intrigues me, and the history of buildings like you.